Hello, everyone. I am Joe Furlong, and this is the AiCR Exchange. I have a special guest on with me today. It's Patrick Zoro. He's a professor in Lehigh University, and he oversees the Financial Engineering MFE Program. Patrick, thank you for joining the conversation today.
And thank you for having me, Joe.
Well, it's a pleasure. So, we've known each other for a couple of years, and one of the things that I've always was curious about, you have a very robust career. And early on in your career, you worked with many leading financial firms in Wall Street. But now you're over at Lehigh University. I'm really curious. How did that career transition from Wall Street to where you're at in Lehigh University?
Thanks for the question. It's actually very interesting because I kind of transitioned slowly while still being on Wall Street because I always found it interesting. Education was always there. So even when I was working on Wall Street, I was also adjuncting here. I remember when it was still there. I used to work in World Trade Center. They had the New York Security of New York Society of Security Analysts, and it was a center that would basically teach new analysts how to analyze spreadsheets and financial statements. And when my first job was actually creating a seminar on capital asset pricing model, which I didn't know anything about at that time, and I learned to do it. So it was always in me to kind of get in front of an audience, and I even taught at one point at the J.P. Morgan's credit training program with Tom Kennedy. And if he hears that, I was always grateful for that opportunity. So I did a lot of all along. And then, as my career winded up as a managing director and after the financial crisis of 2008 and trying to find and keep on going, but eventually I realized, I needed something. I was always concerned that it would not be such an interesting thing, but I will tell you, one thing about teaching is that, I mean, the way I do it is you learn as you do. You learn with the students. Students have this idea that I have this knowledge, right? And then I'm just spewing it out every time over and over. No, I mean, I'm always learning new, especially now with AI. I'm always learning new ways to teach, but also new topics, and that makes it more interesting. So you learn, and it's so much more rewarding, I have to say. To see when the students get it, right? It's something special.
Can I actually ask a question? We were briefly talking before the show began, and I was always interested in. I'm going to ask you to the audience here. So obviously, you hear now the AI is here, and the students just use AI this, AI that, and you came up with an interesting strategy how to counteract your students of using nothing but AI and not actually learning. Can you tell that story again? I thought it was fascinating from your point of view as the professor.
Well, AI is very smart. ChatGPT, for example, and frankly, and this is not a big secret, if you just copy and paste questions that you see in anywhere, and it's a multiple choice, AI will know exactly what it is. What is the, who did that when, and how'd you calculate this, and what is portfolio theory, who created portfolio when. AI will know all that information. But AI does not know what you discussed in a particular time with a student on an afternoon. So the more, if you ask the question, when we met yesterday, during class, privately on our own. So by that time, AI said, "Well, I don't know any of that. What did I say about Warren Buffett? Did I say that he was smart? Did I say that he believed in diversification, portfolio diversification? Do I believe that?" And these were all kind of, they weren't outrightly no answer. They all could say, "Yeah, I mean, he did this, yes." But what did I say? What did I? And AI just didn't know, and he gave the wrong answer. Well, it's a right answer. Yes, he likes to make money, but he also wasn't a big proponent of EBITDA, for example.
Mhm.
Depending on that article that I brought up to the students, said, look, he said he doesn't like EBITDA and he doesn't like portfolio diversification. But frankly, if you look around, you could say that, well, I mean, he does like. It's not an outright negative answer. So if you give a bunch of positive answer, that's a secret. And
That's
you
a
tell them, well, that's the answer that I want. And I tell you, it works every single. The only thing is, it takes a tremendous amount of time because you got to recreate everything from scratch.
I can tell you that is such a creative and simple solution that I've never heard before, and it's like obvious because how are you going to frame a question that AI can't answer, and you solved it. And I agree. I would say it would probably be pretty hard to come up with those
Took me
questions.
3 hours to come up with 10 questions because you got
That
to remember what you asked, but then you got to come up with positive answers,
See,
and you
that's
have to
why
get
I
to
think
one.
you're. That's I think that's why you're a great professor. Is because you do more for your students to actually get them to engage and actually learn, not just put it in a chat and get the answer. Because although the workforce is changing, they still need to understand the concepts. If they don't understand the concepts and they just leverage chat for their entire lives, they're going to come out and being not successful. So
Yeah,
I give you credit on being able to solve for that and work your best to it. Very good.
yeah.
So let's back up a second. I mentioned my first question, Lehigh University's financial engineering or the MFE program. When I'm on LinkedIn and I see you're posting about it all over the place, you have these events and these lunches and dinners and all this other stuff. Tell us about what is the MFP program and why did it form? What are you doing with it?
MFE is basically a quant program, and it was created in 2005, just before the financial crisis. And the idea is to come up with it's like technical analysis, but with math,
Hmm.
essentially. And to look for patterns, to look for trading patterns, and originally it was really for the stock market. How to if you want to work for a hedge fund, if you want to develop algorithm, and you want to let the look for patterns recognition, things of that nature. That portfolio theory. But over the years, especially with AI coming in, it's been migrating into the crypto world because you could have students working at crypto firms that do the same thing on a cryptocurrency that they would do on a stock. Basically, looking for you're looking for, are you being paid for the risk? Essentially, I even have students working on sports analytics.
Hmm.
Not that you're gonna predict the outcome of a game. That's not it. Is what it is. You're saying what is the riskiness of this situation, and are you getting paid for the risk? And that's what
It's
hedge
like
funds are
Michael
all.
Lewis's Moneyball, I guess, right? Michael
That's
Lewis's
exactly what it
Moneyball.
is. That is exactly what
I
it
guess
is. And
that has to be a fascinating topic for a lot of your students because that if they're able to grab something that they really like, and it may not be the financial markets, it may be sports, and they're being able to tie mathematics and analytics to it. It's got to be a great way to do it. So you have both sports and financial markets. Is that fair to say?
that's exactly what they did. It was in fact, one of the students that I had, Jack, ended up going on Millennium, and basically he was in sports analytics, and then we have stocks, obviously, and then when blockchain, crypto, and now with AI, it just 10x the ability of the students to go way beyond because now you could code much faster, much more efficiently. You could run. I mean, I had students that were working on a project with basically, and you probably would appreciate that. You would feed a bunch of 10Ks, a bunch of NK, a bunch of financial statements, and then AI would go in and trying to guesstimate based on what they're saying in the 10K, what type of corporate actions the company would make
Wow.
based
That has
on,
that has value.
yeah, of
And
course.
because let's talk about it. That's more than just the AI doing that. You need to have the skill set to be able to tell the AI what you're looking for, how to do the right prompts, what is the process, how to feed the right information. So are you focusing more on the process to get AI going out? So it's more of a symmetry or a symbiotic relationship?
Well, you need, and this is where you need the kind of the mind, well, quant mind, because AI is so smart that sometimes it quote unquote hallucinate.
Yeah.
It sees something that's not there. The same way I was able to hallucinate it by saying, pick the right answer out of four correct answers.
Yeah.
Then it hallucinates because you say, well, I know they're all potentially correct. So you have to be very careful. It's a very powerful tool, but if it starts hallucinating, then you could get up doing trades that don't make any sense. And the same thing was done with this project we did with this firm in Europe, where basically they were looking, and it was probably more valuable at that time, they were looking at the statement from the Fed to
Yeah.
predict what they would do next. And there is a pattern recognition. It's called fractals. It's called, now when you look at a tree, for example, you do know what it looks like. Well, can't you predict what it's going to look like tomorrow? Well, no, I don't know how the trees are gonna expand, but yet you know what it is, but yet you can't predict. So it's not purely technical; it's mathematical.
That's unbelievably fascinating. And it takes the right, like you said, it takes the right person, the right mind, that quant mind to be able to facilitate it. Even with all the tools that are today, it needs to work. Now, and on that same note, when you're talking to your students and helping them progress through your coursework and getting ready
Correct.
for their professional career, what skills or mindsets do you emphasize in today's students, and how has that changed over the last, say, 3 years?
Well, I mean, obviously, what has happened is I've realized that I think the students needs to be less focused on coursework, but more focused on actually getting a job, because whatever it is that they're studying, it's a quasi science. It's not a science. It's not like becoming a doctor. And if you're a doctor and you do your residency and then you become a doctor, every so many years you need to go back and say, okay, let's make sure you still have the skills needed to operate on patients here. You don't do that once you come up with an MFE degree or an MBA or whatever. You get your MBA and that's it. It just loses its value very quickly, because over time you learn new skills. You don't go back to the original skills, so it disappears. So and that's when I realized that I'm telling the students, yeah, you're very smart, but if you're not able to grab that job, what's the point?
Yeah.
And especially now with AI, unfortunately, because I had students that say, Professor, this is great. I just go in, I created a Python script, it looks at my resume, and it applies for all these jobs that does pattern recognition for the position that I'm looking for. Now, if you were the only one doing it, it's great. But imagine you, Joe, as a business, right? In charge of a business, you get 10,000 emails, 10,000 resumes. So now you need AI.
We have that problem, Patrick. So let me just talk about me for a second on my exact example. So the MIAC firm, which I'm a part of, we are a big believer in our internship program and our externship program, and really engaging. And we've been so fortunate to have you and Lehigh University be a really a critical part of that. So you refer us people, we interview them, we have that relationship. It's not AI driven. We get there, if they're the right fit, we put them in here, let them run for a month or two. If that works, then we extend it. And if they work through the extension, then we give them an offer. Literally in my office in Bethlehem and right on your campus, we have in the other room 15 or so people that has followed that exact same progress, of which maybe 6 of them are from Lehigh University. So I agree with you. College is more than just going to the classroom. It is building those relationships, taking advantage of the opportunities that the university gives, and then building on it. So when you are able to finish, you have that career path. And you have been such a critical part of seeing that in Lehigh University, and with us, it's been fantastic.
And this is why I tell you that I learn all the time, because when I first started, in fact, I was hired originally because they say, well, you work in Wall Street, so you know lots of people, and you could connect me with these people, with the students. That was kind of the idea originally. But then I realized that, well, yeah, but I could send you a bunch of names, but if you don't know what to do with these people, and I will tell you the skill that is needed, the social risk involved in networking is not something that many universities screen for when they look for a student. They look for a very bright student with a high GPA. Yeah, but you also need to look for that student that has the ability to get out there and network. And networking, unfortunately, is not just talking to people, you're talking to conferences. How do you go? What do you do at a conference? How do you connect with someone at a conference? That's suppose somebody on the phone and somebody in a smaller conference, somebody you meet, somebody you know. It's so many different possibilities to connect and talk that it's a separate skill set that I will tell you that, I mean, obviously when I select my students, I try to have the one that have that type of ability. But for some students, it's very difficult to talk to someone they've never met. They figure, well, look, I have my degree and my GPAs. That should be enough. But especially now with AI, like I said before, it's almost impossible for you to know if you're even talking to a real resume to begin with.
So let's talk about that. I mean, I couldn't agree with you more what you just said there, but it's one of those things I think it's easier said than done. So how do you convey to these your students, and ultimately how do they learn this process which they may not be comfortable doing? How does that work
Well,
in your world?
the first thing I tell them now, I tell them you are here to get a job, and I'm your placement officer, literally, right? You're not here to get good grades. In fact, I spoke to a student yesterday. He says, Professor, you know what? I'm going to create my own company. I'm going to go through the curriculum, but I'm frankly spending most of my time coding, talking to AI, developing relationship with my potential future customers, right? So they're spending less and less time on it because they need to spend more and more time as you get to graduation, networking and then deciding what you want. And that takes a tremendous amount of time. We're talking maybe 1 to 2 hours a day. So I tell the students, especially the international students, before they join, just don't think that you're going to sit there and just study and get a good grades and then you send your resume out and you're going to get a job. I said, because frankly, in fact, I would say right now, from the students that already have jobs that haven't graduated yet, 3/4 of them got the job because of the relationship. Like, some of those students with you guys and a bunch of other firms.
Yes.
That is how they get those jobs, because of either the MFE relationship, the Lehigh relationship. Those students are still trying to, go through the rounds of technical expertise. They go through 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and boom, they lose at the 6th round because, they didn't know as much as the next person. So to be that good on all is almost impossible. And then you may have a great, very smart student that doesn't fit, right, the atmosphere of the firm. I
Yes.
mean, there's a certain vibes at MIAC and that other firms don't have. How do you know if you're going to fit in?
Yeah, I call them soft skills. Soft skills is
Soft
is
skills.
equally as important as your hard skills. So I mean, look, when I even talk to the people in here, it says, okay, I need to first understand, do they fit? Do they fit with us? Do they, will they actually understand our culture? Will they, move forward with it? And if the answer is no to that, I don't care if they're the perfect person. If they're not going to fit, they're not going to be successful. And that's not good for them, and it's not good for us. So
But how do you
being able to let your people talk about that is really important.
So how do you interview for that? I mean, the only way you could interview for that is because if I know what you guys are like and I know the student, I say, you know what, you probably fit there better than this other firm. For example, I had a student at Millennium, and students were asking him, so are you going to become an associate, a VP, a director? He says, no, there's no such thing. We're just making money here. So that's a different mentality, right? We're not here to become a managing director. We just get a P&L, and that's working for a hedge fund. That's different than working for someone else. But you don't want to find out when you're there Now, oh wow, this is pretty rough. I know I'm smart, but and
So,
that's the thing
I
that's
can tell you
missing.
when I'm looking at resumes, which I do look quite a bit, one of the first things that I look at in the resume is I go all the way to the bottom and I look at what are their hobbies and interests. And if there's nothing there, I'm like, hmm, my boss, the owner, or co-owner of my act, the enterprise, Bob Husted, he actually asked them about who their school mascot is. He wants to see how involved they are in the school. So that has nothing to do with their experience or anything to that effect. So, and I think that is equally as important to understand how they are and how they'll fit within our culture.
But how do you? But that's for you. A different firm will have a different aspects of things. But you're right, that personal connection. And I remember talking to Tanya about this all the time. And she says, well, professor, the way I got the job is because we had a discussion about beer. I mean, I don't drink, but then I followed up, I learned, and there was something clicked because the atmosphere, I mean, it wasn't at MIAC, it was at a firm in New York.
Mm-hmm.
And she connected with them on a different, but that unfortunately you cannot be done on a piece of paper. You have to, but you have to know who it is that you're going to be working, and therefore it's a lot easier with the relationship, but the social risk. That's that is not an easy thing to do as people think it is.
It is difficult. And I'll tell you one of the tricks that I do is I'm a big Philadelphia Eagles fan. I have been for a very, very long time. And when I wear my baseball hat, it's an Eagles hat. I wear it almost every day. And I can't tell you how many people that I've just started conversation on the street about the Eagles, and they may not be Eagles fan. They may be a Dallas fan, which I had, that's another conversation. But needless to say, they always engage and they spark up this conversation. But not only it's just conversation, I can't tell you how many clients and prospects and relationships that I have created by simply wearing an Eagles hat and talking about it.
And I think because of the way the advent of AI and the powerful it is, I think people are going to be looking more and more for those relationships in terms of jobs and in terms of connections. Because quite frankly, you could now, and I see that on LinkedIn all the time, you should have these things in your resume. Make sure, but you know what? With AI, it's going to create you the perfect resume. Well, that's good, isn't it? Well, no, because if everyone else has a perfect resume, how are you going to be different? Do not fall for that. In fact, I tell my students all the time, besides we're here to get a job, you're here to get a job without a resume.
Yeah, that's well said. I mean, that one sentence nails it. You need to be able to get a job without a resume.
And I have a couple of students like that got jobs without resume. They went in and they got introduced to the relationship. Then they did an internship. Then they were hired. At no point in time were they asked, "What is your GPA?"
I can tell you, I never care about their GPA. Okay, to me is when I talk to them, I understand whether they're a good fit. But there is one thing that is a test that I have is when people come in, it's that soft skills. Are they dressed appropriately? And do they
Definitely.
actually have a resume in their hand? Now, whether or not I actually ask for it or not, but that old school vibe, making sure that, okay, even though we may not need the resume, having that in there proves to me that there is that at least an understanding that of things that need to be done and they're thinking about it and trying very, very hard.
Yeah.
And I can tell you, sometimes I've talked to people, they've come in wearing jeans and shorts and no resume. Well, guess what? You're not going to go far when you do that. Just you're not.
And you see all those things that we're talking about. That is in nowhere in the curriculum.
Yeah, 100% agree with you. So talking about the curriculum, and I'm just curious because I think what makes yours stand out a little bit. You have a process which is what is it called, a capstone, where you actually have someone do something that's real world. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Well, right now we're running about 13 different projects, and every single one of those projects is with an outside firm. Firm in Dubai, firm in New York, in Europe, where they're basically working with the quant on a very specific program. Because when I joined the program itself, I said, well, we had a a capstone, but it was basically do some research. And I said, yeah, but what I want to build something, but unfortunately in finance you can't build anything with your hands. You got to design it, and it's on your laptop. So basically, I said, well, isn't that something that you want to design for yourself? And this firm out of New York, and then they moved to Avignon in France. Basically, say, yeah, what I want to do is I want to build this algorithm that's going to read every single statement from the Fed and predict what it is that they're going to be doing, and that's not on the curriculum. So the student had to learn machine learning algorithm, unsupervised learning, and then of course with the Chat GPT, they had to learn how to use that too, and so it forces them to use skills that are needed in everyday type of situation, and that of course is difficult because they say, but I don't know anything about. I think we work on this firm where it was about large language models that when it just came out. I say, well, tell the student to read this, look at these videos, and then come back to me when they're ready. And one of my students did that. They learned it, never got taught, and now he's a trader in New York City. So
see, that is fantastic, and I could tell you from firsthand that hands-on, real-world experience through your program and at Lehigh University makes the difference between people that are ready to work and ones that are not. Obviously book learning is book learning. I'm not discounting that, but actually being able to have practical experience and being able to execute it in a real world commercial environment is the key. Because guess what? When you get hired, it's no longer, a research project. It is, we need for you to execute so we can make money. That's the
and don't
reality
forget,
of it.
I mean, we're competing with Columbia, we're competing with NYU. And the thing is, what are we competing against? We're not competing for courses because math is math, has been math forever.
Yeah.
So how are you competing? Well, you're competing against the name recognition, but what we have against it is our ability to place the students at just as high jobs, not as many, obviously, and the students recognize. Plus, they like the atmosphere of a small campus, and they still do great job. They still make great money. I mean, our students are, six-figure salaries all the time. So why not?
Yeah. So before we run out of time, we have a couple minutes left.
Mm-hmm.
I listened to your podcast. I was honored to be a guest on your podcast about 18 months ago. It's really, really great. Tell us a little bit about your podcast before we have to go.
Well, basically, I go out and I interview lots of professional in the field, which happens. Some of them end up becoming a sponsor of our projects. Then I revert back to them. I know that Bogdan out of Dubai was an algo trader. I did a podcast with him, and he ended up doing two projects with us on cryptocurrency and portfolio allocation. So it's a great way for me to introduce, to bring attention to the program, but also allow the students to, and in fact, I interview some of the students myself, to come. Some students got jobs from the podcast. I remember Charles did a podcast on pairs trading, and he got a job on an ETF firm in New York City. He's director of research. Why? Because he did the podcast. Somebody saw it, and they called him up. You know what? If I have an advice to give everyone, it's not so much your resume, is you want to post on LinkedIn because recruiters look at that. Of course, you have to have something to say.
Now that's a perfect segue because I was going to say you're very active on LinkedIn. I follow you. I'm very active on LinkedIn. And of course, my firm is active on LinkedIn, AiCR. And please, here's this. Follow us on LinkedIn. AiCR, Joe Furlong, Patrick Zoro. It is absolutely worth the effort. Patrick's posts are fantastic. I'm biased. I like our post as well, but I think Patrick may have me beat on that a little bit. But,
Thank you.
But anyway, Patrick, thank you so much for your time today. It's been a fantastic conversation, and I hope everyone out in the audience really enjoyed it as well. So until next time, enjoy the rest of your day, and goodbye.
Thank you, Joe.